Come for the bread, stay for the politics. I'm Ben Walsh, and this is Let Them Eat Bread. Today we are having a very special and a very short episode of Let Them Eat Bread, as we are not going to be on next week due to just me being out of town, and it figured it'd be nice to make something super quick so I don't have to worry about, having a bunch of bread in the house. So today, for our short episode, we are making shortbread, specifically my favorite shortbread recipe, which is super simple and it's a ratio recipe. And what that means is you can multiply it to make it bigger or smaller. So the ratio is 2 of flour, 1 of butter, 1/2 of sugar. Okay. And you can make this in any combination you want. So today we have 4 cups of flour, we have 2 cups of butter, and we have 1 cup of sugar. And we're just going to mix those together, pat them in here. I'll show you how it's all done, and then chuck it in the oven. When we put it in the oven, I'm going to tell you a little bit about baking times and why you can do shortbreads at different baking times. But in the meanwhile, let's get started. So we've combined our flour and our sugar here, and essentially this is just to make sure that when we mix our butter in, it's going to be much easier for it, and we're not trying to mix the sugar in after the fact. So we're going to build ourselves a nice little wall here, just like we would for any other liquid or liquid type ingredient. And then we're going to pour in our butter. So you want this butter softened at room temperature, but you don't want it melted, okay? The oven is going to do the melting for us. You don't want it melted in the bowl. And you want to make sure to get all the butter out of that bowl because the butter is the primary agent that cooks this into shortbread. So that is why you need as much of it as you can get out of your bowl. Don't put extra in, but just make sure you've got enough. And now we combine. This is going to look a lot like folding, and it will take some time, so don't rush it. If your butter is in large clumps, you want to use your mixing device to kind of cut it into little pieces so you can get as much flour and sugar incorporated as possible. You can also do this process entirely with your hands, and shortly I will switch to my hands, but in the meanwhile, I'm just using a regular rubber spatula here to get this partly combined. So as well as folding the mixture, you want to make sure that you're pressing the flour and sugar into the butter to combine it. I'm also using a chopping motion to break the butter down into smaller pieces. All right, so you could do all this in a mixer or a food processor, but I like doing it this way. And then I'm just going to switch to my hands here, and keep your spatula around because we're going to use it to flatten it. So at this point, your dough will look a little bit like pie crust. It'll be nice and flaky, but we don't want it like this. We actually want it to all kind of come together to one. So we're going to use our hands and make it into one buttery, sugary, floury mass. And if it feels a little buttery, that's okay. Don't add any more dry ingredients to it. Most of the butter will end up becoming less salient as we cook it. So just make sure it's kind of in one mass for the most part. All right, now I'm just going to pick up some of it so you can see. It's going to look very much yellower, like because of the butter. And also, there's going to be no amount of flour that doesn't have any butter in it, or sugar that doesn't have any butter in it. So you could technically bring it all into one piece if you want to, but we don't need to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to take our dough and put it into a 13x9 baking tray that has been greased and lined. Okay, I would pick it up and show you, but my hands are a little covered. But essentially, you want to line it with parchment paper. You don't want to use tin foil. Parchment paper is going to make it much easier. And when you're doing your greasing of the tray, you want to grease the metal parts of the tray, put the parchment paper on top of it, and then after that, you also want to grease the parchment paper. That'll help with getting it out. So we're going to transfer this over a little bit at a time. It doesn't need to be one block when you transfer it. And the reason for that is because we are going to make it the right shape and size once it's in the dish. Okay. Just get the last of this in here. Perfect. Now, any that's sticking to your hands or whatever, just, get that off. Remember, it bakes, so you don't have to worry about it. Also, you know, we wash our hands before we start baking here, so you don't have to worry as much about that. So give it a quick press down to flatten it out. Get the excess dough off your hands. Then wash your hands and come back, and we're going to flatten it out. So now we're going to take the bottom of a metal cup measure and or your spatula, and we're just going to press this flat. So you can see it's in a bunch of clumps right now, and we're just going to press it flat to the ends of the container. And it doesn't really matter how thick it is, as long as it's thick, consistently thick across the board. So where it sticks, you're just going to use your spatula here to get that off, and then keep pressing it in. And at some point, you're going to just need to use your hands. Just flatten it out. Honestly, you can use whatever method you think works best. Just get it to an even consistency. Use a fist, use an open hand, use a tool if you want to. Beautiful thing about shortbread is there's very little about it that's truly exact. So don't fret about making it perfectly flat either. You will not hurt the shortbread or your enjoyment of it if it's not flat. All right, so you can see this is mostly flat. You can see my handprints in it, but that's really not a big deal, okay? So if you want to flatten it out further, just take a flat surface to it. Just make sure that you've got some way so that it doesn't stick, because you've just done a lot of work to get it flat. You don't want it to be worse now. You don't want it to be worse after you were trying to flatten it, right? Once you do that, we're going to chuck it in a 350-degree Fahrenheit oven. And this is going to be a variable time. So, and the reason for that is a bunch of reasons. One, it doesn't always cook the same way each time. But more importantly, everyone likes their shortbread with a little bit of a different level of bite. Personally, I like a softer shortbread, so I put my shortbread in for like 20, 25 minutes. This will probably need a little bit more because I've made a little bit of a bigger shortbread today. But really, you just want to make sure that it's done to your likeness, okay? So if you want it to be like a really dark golden brown color and have a nice crispy shortbread, then great, leave it in for longer, talking 35 to 45 minutes. If you're like me and you like a softer shortbread, maybe 20 to 30 minutes is going to be okay. My best advice for this, especially because you're cooking it at a relatively low temperature of 350 degrees, is you're going to want to put it in, leave it for 20 minutes, and then every 10 minutes after that, just check on it and see if it's done. I'm going to be leaving mine in until I have a golden brown crust and nice pale in the middle. Okay, that'll give me a nice little bit of a crusty, a nice little bit of a crunch on the outside, but nice and soft and luscious and very flaky on the inside. Okay, and that's personally how I like mine. You don't have to have it that way, of course. You can do it any way you like, but that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to put this in the oven right now and set my timer for 20 minutes. Meanwhile, we are going to talk some politics. I've got a couple of stories I want to talk to you guys about this week, but just like I said, we'll put in for 20 minutes and then we'll check it every 10 minutes afterwards until it's done, and we'll just keep doing stories until it's where I want it to be. All right, guys, be right back. You heard the timer go. This is our work of art. We're going to want to leave it in here to cool for a little bit, so I'm just going to put this down here, you know, for 10, 15 minutes, okay? This is where I want it. You guys can cook it for more, you can cook it for less. Actually, we've got a good golden brown color here, so it actually might be a little harder than I want it to be, but this is fully cooked. Have it harder than you want. But you want to leave it here for 10, 15 minutes, just enough for it to cool a little bit, and then you're going to want to use some kind of tool. This is metal, so you probably don't want to use that, but you know, use a plastic spatula, use something like that to dislodge the sides, pull it out, cool it on a rack. Once it has cooled completely as absolute room temperature, do not do this while it's warm. You can cut it into squares, diamonds, triangles, whatever you want, okay? But it will be absolutely beautiful, and I can't wait to see what shortbreads you make and how much shortbread you make, because this is one of my favorite recipes ever. By the way, this is also a great base recipe if you want to make something like lemon bars or key lime bars or even cheesecake bars, anything like that that requires a shortbread base. This is the perfect shortbread recipe for that. All right, guys, that is it for this week. I will be out next week, as I mentioned. I cannot wait to see you again in 2 weeks, and we will have so much more to talk about when that comes and a brand new recipe. All right? Take care, everybody. Thanks for watching this video, guys. If you liked it, throw a like on it, share with your friends, and subscribe for more of our content. You can also find all of our videos and clips on youtube.com. Just search Let Them Eat Bread and you'll find all of our content. Alright guys, see you next time. Bye for now.